21 dump trucks a day for a year to fill in this volume of fill. The project would involve construction of a new 450-foot long bridge over Chicken Creek. The project would require a 150-foot right-of-way to accommodate 3 lanes of traffic, 2 sidewalks, 2 guardrails, fill slopes, and 2 fences on the toe of both fills. The impact of the bridge, road elevation described, and necessary right-of-way would wipe out 9 houses. Several homes on the east side of Eastview Road are less than 150 feet from the western side of the right-of-way. Due to the width of the right-of-way for this volume of fill, 5 homes would be in direct path of the right-of-way. 2 additional homes would have their access cut off and have a 3-lane and 40 feet above them. 1 home would be removed to improve the dangerous Edie-Eastview intersection. 1 home, which is on the west side of Eastview Road and in the rural reserve, would be removed by bridge construction. In addition, raising the elevation of Eastview Road would eliminate access to 4 homes in the rural reserve to the west of...
Brian, you have about 30 seconds.
Okay, the last thing I wanted to emphasize is that Mr. Galati talks about some complications in developing Eastview Road, Elwert Road. But what he doesn't discuss at all is that there is vacant land on both sides of Elwert Road for almost the entire run that would allow for expansion without impacting homes. He also doesn't address that the neighborhoods that exist next to Elwert Road were built during the current traffic patterns. The farm road he describes in his memo is well over 25 years ago, before there was construction in that area. And the current physical limitations at Elwert would be a much smaller engineering project to remedy traffic flow and its impacts than this fantastical scheme that he proposes in his memo. Thank you for your time.
Marianne Highland. And Marianne, we have 3 minutes.
Good evening, members of the CAC, consultants, and city officials. My name is Marianne Highland. I live on Eastview Road. I'm the president of the Eastview Road Neighborhood Association, and we are opposed to the construction of the north-south bypass, as you know from our comments that we've been submitting since December, your December 21 meeting last year when you announced the plan. We are building, Brian and I are building off of a review of the plan by a retired engineer who reviewed the plan, and our comments about the feasibility are based on that discussion. So I want to add on what Brian said. I want to talk about one of the rationales for the plan is Mr. Galati said that the proposal would move trucks off of Elwert and then bypass the new realigned aspect of Elwert Road. But in fact, trucks will have to go to and from Elwert Road to use the bypass. So that doesn't make any sense at all. I want to draw your attention to the comments of the survey that recently went out. If you read the comments, you will notice that an overwhelming majority of people who commented on the subject were opposed to the north-south connector. They're opposed to the Elwert Road realignment, and they're opposed to the overpass that you have presented now as a plan to cross Highway 9 and connect up to the north-south connector. So you're getting overwhelming opposition via the community remarks. I think it's important also to mention that the plan that you've presented does not take into consideration that east-west connection from the Eastview Road area where we live to Highway 99. So the Elwert realignment actually cuts off our direct access to Highway 99 and requires us to snake around roundabouts. So we anticipate a pretty significant increase in our commutes.
About a minute.
So, I just want to take a minute just to sit back, slow down, and say, let's think about this, folks. What is this really accomplishing? I know you're going to be asked that. You're going to be asked whether or not you want this on the map or you think it should go. I sat in the TAC meeting today and I listened to it. I don't know if any of you did, but most of those experts, they're opposed to the north-south connector. They're opposed to this. You know why? because it doesn't make sense. It's not going to help traffic flow. And the main arterial that you have to work with is Elward. And that is what you need to be working with. So what we request that you do is you take this off the map and you begin for once to please start focusing on Elward, which is the arterial that you have that is going to have the capacity to accommodate the growth you're planning on adding to Sherwood. Thank you.
Jeffrey, are you on the line?
I am.
You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. This is Jeff Kleinman, Kleinman, 1207 Southwest 6th Avenue, Portland, 97204. I am the attorney for the Eastview Road Neighborhood Association. Wanted to add a couple of comments. Number one, the environmental feasibility of the north-south connector that's been proposed to go along Eastview just not only hasn't been proven, but isn't there. And the environmental damage to the sort of work that's proposed would be extreme. Second, there is not now, and there will not be, a further connection to the north from the intersection of Eastview and Edie Road. So if you're running through traffic there, as has been said, it's going to have to come back to Elward. Trucks are not going to go through the winding rural roads. The county states that there will not be any new road construction in the rural reserve. You really ought to talk to the county about what they think of this proposal. And lastly, there's going to be a considerable taking if this goes forward, as has been described, of my client's properties. So when you think about, as has been said by staff in the past, that this is, oh, you know, we're just trying to draw a line on a map, you know, maybe it'll happen, maybe it won't. Well, first of all, it's not going to happen for the reasons that I mentioned. But second of all, putting the line on the map destroys the value of my client's properties and will result in an inverse condemnation, in my opinion, for which the city is going to have to compensate by putting the line on the map that doesn't go anywhere. So it is a bad idea and it should not be done. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Jeff. So I had those three people signed up to speak, but is there anybody else in the audience?
You should, this is Jeff Kleinman. You should have Chris Clemo signed up.
Is Chris on the line?
Chris, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Oh,
Yes,
There
I
we
am.
go.
great. Chris, you have three. Chris, you have 3 minutes.
All right. My name is Chris Clemo. Last name is Clemow. My business address is 2237 Northwest Torrey Pines Drive, Bend, Oregon, 97703. I'm a transportation engineer that is working with the Eastview neighborhood. I'm not going to rehash the materials you just heard from the Eastview group and including the attorney, but what I want to focus on a little bit here is the technical elements of this north-south connector. All of the materials you're going to hear tonight, you know, after us, really don't focus at all on this north-south connector. In fact, there's going to be very little attention paid to it. And you'll even hear that during, you know, the presentation from DKS, that this north-south connector, which is Eastview Road, is not really anticipated to carry much traffic other than local traffic, and certainly not any displaced truck traffic. The road isn't going to really connect anything to the south or to the north, you know, outside of this plan area, and nor will it within the planning period. So the real, I guess, question here is why should this plan continue to have this road in it if it's not going to function as a true higher order, you know, in this case, collector level roadway? And really, rather, the energy should be focused on Elward. And you're going to hear that tonight through almost all the materials that get presented to you, that, you know, Elward is the appropriate place it's an arterial roadway. The alignment is good. I mean, maybe some connections and some improvements to the road need to occur, but it's the correct roadway for this to occur on. And all the modeling, all the transportation modeling that you've done is going to show that. So I'd say, we're hyper-focused on this north-south connector, but really your plan should not be focused on that. It really needs to be focused, more internal in the plan area and on Elwood Road. And with that, I'll close my testimony.
Great. Thank you, Chris. All right. So I know that we had some folks in the audience. And Carla, I know that you submitted written comments. Would you like to come up? If you could just state your name and address.
I'm Carla. Oops, I'll sit down first. I'm Carla Bauer. I'm at 21525 Southwest Eastview Road, and I have lived there for 32 years. I'm adamantly opposed to the recently disclosed proposal by Bob Galati to develop Southwest Eastview Road instead of Elwood Road as a viable north-south road. Let me just, Brian addressed many of my points eloquently, so I will be shorter than what I was expecting. But I want to just add the statement that Elwood Road currently desperately needs designated left turn lanes on the intersection of Elwood and Edie. On my way down here tonight, what I saw was what I see many times, and that is, especially on the Elwood Road, that people who need to turn left sit at the light until the light just changes and they zip across. It's the only opportunity they have. And those are accidents waiting to happen. So that is a little aside. One of the things I didn't hear Brian mention was how homes south of the bridge would access Eastview going north itself or south across the bridge, or do they just have to be abandoned? And one of the things to my frugal mind is, what is the cost difference between expanding flat, straight Elwood Road compared to the proposed Eastview Road roundabout that has to be big enough for trucks to be able to, hauling trailers, be able to go around the circle without taking out posts, the amazing amount of fill that Brian described, new road construction necessary to reduce the grade, both on the slope going to the bridge and then heading south across the bridge.
You have about 30 seconds, Carla.
Okay. The amount of new road construction is incredibly expensive. And I can't help but wonder who would profit from the vastly more costly Eastview versus Elwood development. Thank you.
State your name.
I'm Bob Hall. I live at 21370 Southwest Eastview Road. I'm also the owner of B&P Hill Farm, certified organic since 1989, salmon safe since 2005. The environmental impact of this bypass, if it were to go down Eastview Road, would put me out of business. It'd destroy the farm. Right now, the biodiversity is such that Oregon State University comes and visits my property twice a year to study the bugs and the birds. That's gone. And why? All I can see is, unless you're a cement contractor, heavy equipment contractor, I have no idea why anybody would want to do this. It makes no logical sense to me. Thank you.
Yep, you can just, if you could just state your name and address.
Okay. My name is Kaisley Martin. I live on 19020 Southwest LeBeau Road. I'm a Sherwood resident and a junior at Sherwood High School, and I'm here with my family. We live adjacent to the concept plan area and have for many years. My dad grew up here and graduated from Sherwood. We've seen a lot of change. We understand that the value of planning for the future and the need to create opportunities for jobs in Sherwood. However, we do not want industrial uses adjacent to our family farm. We ask that you integrate the housing option adjacent to our family home, shown in Alternative 3, into whatever option you finalize. Please keep the uses adjacent to our home residential instead of employment so that our family can continue to live here for many generations to come. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the audience that would like to speak this evening? Otherwise, we're just going to move on to our second agenda item. All right, so with that, we're moving on. I need to do. I'm not sure who's controlling it.
While we're getting this laptop going, I'll give you a little bit of an agenda overview to the committee members. Basically, tonight is trying to bring information for you about the alternatives. And we've got, as you saw, the open house, developer tour, some alternative memo that we put in the packet as well. And all of that is to try and kind of put the pieces together about what are the pros and cons of different aspects of the alternatives. And then the part that's listed here as a interactive exercise at the end, we have a program that will allow some sort of online polling amongst you. So we'll see if we can sort of set a direction for the plan using the base of the information that we have tonight. The one piece that we don't have in the packet that is presented by PowerPoint tonight is the transportation evaluation. So when we get to that piece, Carl Springer from DKS will come up and present that for you. You might have seen last time we were trying to calculate how much time do we need to get ready for this meeting. One of the things I was trying to roll in my head was how much time do we need for the traffic analysis. So we ended up doing the presentations version of it as opposed to being able to publish last week. Yep, here we are.
But that will be published.
Pardon?
We will get that published, though.
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
So I think for the technical advisory committee, we gave them a little kind of overview of the three alternatives because we hadn't had a chance to kind of review those with the TAC yet. But since you all have been seeing these alternatives take shape, I think we can skip past this. And I think Erica is going to kick off our open house and survey summary.
Hey, Joe, before we go any further, can I just comment on the minutes from last meeting? Is that okay?
Yes, please. Oh, I'm sorry.
Good. You all left me off again. I was in attendance and you all left me off again, so I'm kind of getting a complex here, but I was there. Because you mentioned me later on in the minutes, but you didn't put me in the attendees. So
Thank you. We'll fix that. Erica, kick us off and then we'll end Kate's comments.
All right. So as many of you know, we held an open house last month on October 20th at the Ridges School. We did a lot of public outreach for the open house. We advertised it, on the city's webpage, social media accounts, the utility billing email list that's distributed to 2,000 people. Plus, we sent postcards to every property owner in Sherwood West. We had a pretty good, decent turnout. We had 60 people sign in at the event, and probably additional 20 to 30 people attended without signing in. At the open house, we had several boards up, and we went over the design concepts of the plan. We talked about parks and open space and trails, different housing types. We talked about each kind of plan alternative, and then we went over the transportation concepts itself. In addition to the in-person open house, we had an online open house that had a survey, and that same survey was actually presented at the open house in a comment form as well. So with that, I'm going to talk about the online survey results for each of the 3 alternatives in the 4 districts that we have. So the North District on the online survey results, the first ranked option for the North District out of the 3 alternatives was alternative 1. Alternative 3 was the second preferred approach, and then alternative 2. And this is all in your
It goes
packet.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Sorry, 1.
Or 1, 2, 3.
Yeah, sorry. Alternative 1, and then alternative 2, and then alternative 3. Thank you. This is on page 8 of your packet. So moving on to the Far West District, and the preferred alternatives. Alternative 1 was the preferred alternative, followed by alternative 2, and then alternative 3. So we can, yeah. Did you find the page? Okay. Oh. So moving on to the Southwest District, I think is the next one.
Far West and then West.
Oh, Far West.
The middle one.
Far West.
So we just looked at Far West.
Yep.
All right, we're on the west.
We're on West. So the preferred alternative for the West District was alternative number 2, followed by alternative 1, and then alternative 3.
Yeah, I mean, sorry. Can you go back? I mean, that's big. To say that's preferred is, I mean, they're splitting hairs here, right?
Yeah, a lot of, some are pretty close. Yeah.
I think when we say preferred, it's just that this had the highest overall score when you combine the number 1 rankings with balancing the how few number 3 rankings it got. So that's what the sort of average weighted score is. And that's why we also included the chart on the left, which shows you, under each alternative where it was ranked. But yeah. And we recognize that these will kind of factor into the decision making about which alternative or combination of alternatives we move forward with, but this is not sort of like decided by any means.
All right, so the Southwest District, looking at the 3 alternatives, kind of the preferred approach was alternative 2, followed by alternative 1, and then alternative 3.
And I should just point out that we didn't include any kind of summary of the written comments in this presentation, but those are included in your packet in the summary memo, and then all of the detailed written responses are at the very back of your packet. You get all the way to the end of the 130 some pages. So that's all chronicled there. And in addition to the land use alternatives, we asked some questions about some of the transportation concepts that we've been discussing as part of this project, and just had kind of open-ended questions about all of those concepts. So yeah, do we want to do any of the sort of verbal report out of what we heard at the meeting, or just kind of?
Let's actually turn to the membership here. As you look through the materials or heard this presentation tonight, what questions or comments do you have about the feedback we got?
I don't have a question about the feedback, but I do have a question about the overpass connection at Brookman, and I was kind of taken aback that all of a sudden there was this thing that I had never even heard of, and I know it's been talked about in other committees and other areas of government. but maybe I missed a meeting or something, but I had never heard it. And then all of a sudden it showed up on all our maps. So I just wonder if somebody could speak to that.
I can speak a little bit to it, if you don't mind. Yeah, you can make an argument that whether it's even part of this project or not, but right now the county has Brookman designated as a 5-lane thoroughfare. Their vision is that eventually connects to I-5 out through Wilsonville. So that's the county's plan for that road at this point. Now, we do have some challenges with that. We don't think that's appropriate, but keep in mind that when we're talking about that, where that idea came from was, how do we keep East and West Sherwood connected? Are we going to have more growth and just continue to have this case where you can't get across 99? So some of the ideas we've been kicking around, and again, very future-looking, hypothetical, 20, 30, 40 years out, is do we have an overpass that allows East and West Sherwood to connect without having to cross 99 and go through lights and do those types of things. So we're putting it out there as a marker for future conversations.
Definitely, I'd like to say that I love the idea. I think it's great. I just was kind of like, I feel like that does have a kind of an impact on what we're talking about on our side of the road, where we are. So, thank you.
Yeah, and I apologize if I'm not sure when did we get that when did that come into the conversation? I mean, I've had it in other conversations, so it all kind of gets melded together for me. But
I second that, because my only concern about kind of feeling a little tad blindsided on that is why it is connected, and I understand that. There's also a connection here, there's feedback that's tying the two together, and difficult as it already is, that we're adding this on there. So I'm glad this is being talked about, so there is some disconnect with the dissatisfaction, with the Eastview, et cetera. Thank you. I'll table my next question. Thank you. It's coming though.
Anything else on the online feedback materials or the open house? I was at the land use station. I had a lot of questions just about how annexation works. I shuttled them over to the experts, but also kind of questions just about the general land use categories people were interested in. Where is attached housing? Where is detached? That kind of thing.
I have just maybe stepping back a little more of a general question. It's transportation related, and obviously has to do with a lot of the feedback we got in the survey as well as in the comments tonight. Is I feel like maybe I'm missing a step here, because as far as I'm aware, this committee doesn't propose specific roads, and certainly hasn't proposed any specific road get developed along Eastview Road. I'm not quite sure where all this Bob Galati memo stuff is coming into play. I'm a little confused personally, because again, this is a concept plan. We don't put roads on maps in a concept plan. We talk about very high level concepts. I know there's, among this committee, the discussions I remember having is there's a desire to have an east-west connector to take through traffic off of Elward in the long term. But I don't know why. But what am I missing here, where everyone's assuming this is happening? Like there's some proposal that this is happening on Eastview Road, and I don't remember being in any meeting where we've ever said that. Nor do we have that really in the germane of what we do here. So what am I missing?
Can I just say something about that? The fact that as a citizen, when you see things like this, a lot of times we see things that, that's just a concept. We have no idea. It's never going to happen. And then, a few years later, all of a sudden it's happening. You hardly even knew it happened. You weren't even aware. So I can understand the concern.
Totally understand
the minute it is on anything that the city's putting out there, it is something you're thinking about. So, obviously and I think that I appreciate all these people showing up and expressing their, this is early on, because I think everybody knows if you don't start saying it early on, it's already too late. So I don't know that anybody said specific, that's just my opinion from a layman's,
But there's being references being made to a plan, and there's been, engineering discussions, and Eastview Road is going to be developed with bridges and infill, and I'm like, wait, what is going on? That this has bypassed us completely.
Well, I think we did talk a little bit about asking about a bit of a study or something just to see if it was even somewhat feasible. So I think there was just somewhat of a feasibility study from what I understood.
But not a plan.
But not a plan, no. It was just like, is it actually even possible?
Yeah.
I was the same way. I mean, I want to ask questions, but I felt like I'd missed something, and after reading through the material, I still had no idea how Bob Galati got involved in our level. So I'm not trying to toss anybody here. I'm just as confused as anybody else tonight, and that's not a comfortable look. Thank you.
So, and if I could just add, the way I think about that, and just going back to the concept of a concept plan, if I can say that, is these are really long-term conversations that involve a lot of agencies and talking to the county and the state. The planning horizons can be extremely long for these. By having that, as Bob called it, a crayon on the map, saying the way I view it is we're basically saying, hey county, hey state, we have a problem. We have a ton of traffic coming out of Yamhill County trying to get to the work centers. You're not paying attention to this corner of the county. I sat in a meeting with Metro where they said 99 West does not have any congestion. They actually said that when they were trying to prioritize corridors that they need to look at for improvement. So really we need to get something on the map so in the next cycle, when we want to have those conversations, they're not saying, well, why isn't this in your concept plan? Because that's what they'll say. So it's a very long-term, just putting a flag in the ground that says this is a conversation that we need to start having with all these agencies. I agree with Doug. That proposed route through Eastview, it's not going to work. I mean, that's crazy. I agree 100%. But that doesn't mean in 15 years the rules around the rural reserve change and we can look at other alignments outside the concept area and even go south. There's all kinds of options that could open up down the road. We're just putting in my mind, that's just me talking, we're just putting a flag in the ground that this is an important conversation about traffic moving through our community and getting better partnership from the state and the county to help resolve those issues, and Metro. So that's how I look at it.
Just to add in from the project team side, what you just said, Tim, is actually super consistent with the direction we heard about January or so. It's hard to pick the right month, but about that point in the process, excuse me, where we need to have something on the map to capture the concept. Hence the line. Hence some, I think, sort of coffee klatch discussions with neighborhood setting, which led to 2 options being on there. And so those have been on the map since, and the team has brought information about it and analyzed it to study that concept. So that's kind of the long and short of it. That's the direction we heard and kind of what brought us to today.
Yeah, and we had a long conversation in the last meeting about just how we draw these maps, to your point earlier, because it's confusing to the public when they look at that, because they think, oh, that's where the road's going to go. And as we all know, development happens one property at a time as owners sell, and what you think is going to happen day one, what actually happened can be 2 different entirely things. Anyways, yeah.
So there's a very practical question here, and maybe I can just phrase it and we can kind of work through our agenda and return to it to answer it. Should the line be on the map at all? Or should the concept be described separately from the concept plan map? And we don't have to answer that right now, but it would be helpful to answer it in the course of the meeting. And it's probably helpful in the minds of lots of the visitors here tonight to try and have a sense of that. So
yeah, and I think to your, it's a good question. I think I even maybe suggested that at a previous meeting, is because we don't know the ultimate route of this, this bypass if we ever get one, and very well it could be outside of what's currently in the urban reserves, right? So I like the idea of you know, you put it on a map, and obviously this is what happens, right? And with understandably so. If I lived there, I would be here doing the same thing. So, to me, I like the idea of calling out, you know, in a box, Jason, you know, like where your legend of the map is. It's that, you know, something that says there's in part of this concept plan is that we need to consider a long-term, you know, connector, you know, north-south connector bypassing the heart of what will be, you know, the west part of Sherwood. Right?
Yeah.
And we don't know where that's going to be yet, but we want that concept captured.
And I think you have options. I mean, it could be done as in a legend box. It could be done as its own text in a concept plan report. There's various ways to do it.
From this neighborhood, telling their concerns, and I feel like they haven't been heard, and we continue talking about the same concept plan over and over again with this bypass, and they've gotten to the point of hiring an attorney and paying for engineering to look at this. So I think we need to make a decision on what that's going to look like, so that they don't feel like they have to fight us on this when we're on their side.
Yeah. So do you want to try and get closure on that right now, or would you like to kind of just?
Yeah, we're here talking about it.
Okay, all right.
How does the traffic study have any, does the traffic study have anything to do with it?
Yeah, the traffic, since the line was on the map
Yeah.
and we were doing our traffic impact analysis, we thought we'd bring some information from that.
What was I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, so we had this discussion at the last meeting, and we've had this has kind of been an ongoing discussion, but I think if you don't, so I kind of like the concept of don't put anything on the map, but the minute we don't put anything on the map, what are some of the number one concerns about living in the Sherwood community? It is traffic. It is transportation. So I think if we don't put it on there, we're going to get asked, even if it's still a concept, what are you going to do with the traffic patterns that are like the number one concern in this area? So I think we're going to have to address it somehow.
Okay, let's go to this comment here.
Of this road without being so specific as to where it's going to be. That it's within this region in general.
Yes, I mean, you have all those options available to you, sure.
We don't put a single road on the map in anything we do in this committee.
Right, but now it's getting like Tamara was saying, now it's getting tied into all these outside third-party resources that people are paying for. So why are we being so specific about it in the concept plan rather than just saying this needs to be addressed? As
We aren't being specific about it in the concept plan. It's just, it's being interpreted that way because you have to if you put a line, you have to put a line somewhere.
So, but like you were saying, and I think you agree, can we just say that this is part of the concept in general, that we view this bypass road, this connector road in general within this region, and just leave it at that for now?
I agree. I think if we have some text, not just a legend, but a paragraph or two.
Right.
I think we need both.
Yeah.
Because I think we need both, because I think it needs to be in the legend of the map, so when the map is looked at independently of the rest of the report, it's still in there.
Yeah.
But I also think you need further descriptive text that goes in more depth, you know, in
We
the.
talk about roundabouts, we talk about other issues that we're looking at implementing. So, I mean, the opportunity to expand Elwert into more of a connector there. I mean, that's part of this concept, right? We don't plan the road, the road is existing. So how does that play into it?
I think part
Because
of
we
it-
haven't been presented with an idea that actually uses Elwert. We're planning to develop that.
Early on, we didn't want to have Elwert cut Sherwood into threes. So the original concept was that Elwert wasn't a solution because we'd have two major highways going through, cutting the community into threes. So the concept was we just need to move away so we keep Sherwood as a small community, which was asked for, walkability, which was asked for. We want to be able to get to the schools and everything else without crossing major highways, all that. That's the reason why we kind of went, you know what, we don't know exactly where the road's going to go, but we need the road to be on this side of the community to keep the community together. It sounds like people are taking that line and saying, well, this is exactly where it's going to go, which I've never thought that that's where the line's going to go. It was a concept. We've always said it was a concept. We just need it on that side of the road, or we need it on that side of the community somehow. So it's somehow it's got to a point that it's taking too literally, and I don't think we're looking that way, but we got to figure it out.
So let me just, if I could sort of rephrase back and we'll get some other input around the table. The idea that's on the table right now is that the concept would be described in the materials we're working towards, which by the way is an advisory recommendation up to council. And so the concept is that there's an alternative to Elwert, or there's alternative north-south connectivity needed. Is that the best way to say it?
If I'm just going to make a suggestion. If you're going to put anything in the map, and again, we've talked about this in other meetings, it can't be just a line that looks like a road and connects. It just needs to be like a two-ended broad arrow that says we need something over here. And we need
I'm getting there. I'm getting there.
Yeah.
So that
exactly.
so that there would be the concept is that there is alternative north-south connectivity needed. That's what we're working towards, right? But that's the idea behind this, right? Okay. It would be done on the map somewhere, in the legend is the way it's been phrased in our conversation here, and it would be described in the text of the concept plan report. And frankly, that's where I would put the broad crayon diagram.
Sure.
Just as a suggestion, okay? So yeah. So that's kind of what I'm pulling together from the comments that I hear from others. I think I saw a head nod over here. That sounds like that's going the right direction.
I'm a little worried about not putting anything on the map. All of a sudden, we're going to have other communities coming to us saying, like, what do you want us all to drive down to Elwert and all drive down this street to get to here? How are we going to pull this off? So we're kind of goofy either way.
They're going to
So,
ask.
so we're all going to go in circles. So I think it's just somehow we did think about it. We do need a south-north connector. The reason we want it is to get traffic around the community and not divide the community.
Let's keep going around. I just want to get a couple of other members to weigh in, but
So,
go
I
this
think
way.
we've had this idea in the past. I still think it's a good one, right? Where you have a 50% transparent, really wide dotted line with arrows at both ends, and it's just doing kind of like a loop around the outside of the planning area, right? So it shows visually that you want this connection, but it doesn't look like a road on a route. If I had my computer, I could do it myself.
Could it not be its own separate road that isn't necessarily taking over a road that's already currently existing with?
It doesn't matter where you put it. You're going to drive through someone's place.
You are, but
So I think it's a concept.
An edge of two farms as opposed to going through middle of a neighborhood.
But at this stage, we don't have to figure out where it goes. We just have to draw a concept that there's a road that's going to connect from 99 and Brookman roughly to somewhere up in the northwest, outside of Sherwood, right? And it goes in this general direction.
Can I make a suggestion that's kind of contrary to the whole north-south connection thing? In that, looking at this whole west and southwest, south and west areas, that there is still a conceptual connector at that far end, which would be south of Chicken Creek, that is more of a neighborhood collector that pulls the residential traffic that way and down to Kruger and Chapman, and potentially this overpass thing, which then alleviates a lot of that neighborhood traffic on Elwert. Knowing that Elwert, we've decided that Elwert should look like Sunset, which means it's going to not divide our town. I mean, I don't think Sunset divides our town, no matter how much traffic is on it, right? I mean, it's very inclusive of everything. So to make it more like that far west side is more, okay, if I live in this neighborhood, I'm going out to there, I'm going down to the major arterial of Kruger to get to 99, or whatever that is, as opposed to expecting that road to carry the north-south traffic. I mean, I'm just thinking about it entirely different. It doesn't cross Chicken Creek.
It does not.
Right.
That doesn't solve the through traffic problem. That
Here's the issue. As soon as you draw it, it's somewhere. So
Doesn't, so is the widening of Roy Rogers expected to alleviate any of that?
That's a really good point, because another strategy is you make Elworth so unusable
Yeah, you
for
make
through
it 35
traffic,
miles an
you force
hour
people
and
down
you, I mean.
to Roy Rogers, and that's a concept we can explore
I mean, I
as
think
well.
we should be doing that anyway.
We talked about that. I mean, that's been a huge
Realistically,
proponent.
we don't want the trucks to go that way. We want them to go to the major highway and go that way.
It's already built.
Have
It's
you got
already
an
being
easel
built.
and a pad? I mean, we can draw this. This is not rocket science. Let's get an easel and pad and do it the old-fashioned way here. And let me get a couple of other comments around the table. Any other opinions? We got to about here. Thank you for the idea, by the way. Keep going around. Anything to add?
No, I just think we're going to have to address the issue, because if not, people are going to ask us. So
yeah,
that's my take.
Yeah.
It's going to take a little while to set that up, but I think where we're headed is a very generalized depiction of this, and I just want to make sure that we sort of leave the room on the same understanding of what that is.
It's
That's up to the committee. My advice would be keep it at the committee for a while here.
Will it be accepted and adopted through the metro and state processes if we start planning outside the urban area? And then to the point that was made earlier, is there, whether, I just want to be clear, I think the issues are crossing Chicken Creek that seem to be really difficult, but are we really talking about doing that in a 20-year horizon or a 50-year horizon? Is that part of the transportation plan? Because all of the far west is low-density residential, and I think it would be very bad planning if we didn't provide for connected roads, even if in the sub-areas. I mean, crossing Chicken Creek, big wide spot, but we still, I think as a committee, are obligated to provide north-south and east-west connectors in each sub-area. And to ignore that transportation need will generate more transportation problems that we have in the rest of Sherwood. We don't have, all the Sherwood Road only goes east-west. If you try and go anyplace else east-west, you run into a stoppage someplace. And if we don't plan for full connections in certain areas, we're going to be creating another traffic problem.
I'll just add.
It is, can we plan outside our concept area?
And the way you phrased it was, would Metro or others? Yeah.
Plan be viable through the metro and state adoption processes?
My opinion is no, unless you were to really caveat it as, we don't know whether or not this is going to happen, but here's an idea, here's a local want, or here's however it would be phrased.
Talking about the reference to some sort of north-south connector if we don't put it on the map.
Yeah.
Our process, and Eric will help me when I fail here, is that our task is to plan within the urban growth area, not plan rural. We can't go into the rural area. And even if our community and our city council adopts this plan, it still has to go through metro and state to be approved as a viable plan. And I don't know if we can plan a road in the rural area.
So you're saying if the mention of the need of that in the future could potentially negate the validity of our.
The alternative for transportation planning in the concept plan area is outside our planning area.
I see what you're saying. Yeah, okay.
Then we might have a fail and Metro may just push it back to us anyway. So I don't want to create a plan that fails.
Again, I think we have to keep it general. Yeah, and I think we had, to his point, we need to caveat it, like,
Right.
any reference outside of this is, yeah,
That's what I said
yeah,
last time, which is draw a big block that says, you know.
somewhere,
North, south, west,
yeah.
on the west.
Apologies that we weren't ready for the instant drawing, but let's go for it.
Just, yeah, right in this, if you get it in the center, I think.
Doesn't matter, the thing's facing the wrong direction.
Because we're using that camera. You can have Brad
Just turn
flip
it
the
around.
camera.
Yeah, turn it around when you show it.
Or just turn it, when it's done, you can just flip it.
It's
Brad's
good.
on it.
Yeah.
Oh, Brad's got it. Oh,
Yeah.
look at that.
Thank you, Brad.
There's a study. Take the suggestion. One thing to keep in mind was that it would be a diagram that does something like tell me if this is not big enough. Oops, across the chicken creek, that's right.
I can do that. Yeah, I think that's fine. Crossing.
Something like that. That was what I was hearing as you were talking.
Yeah, I think in the text, we talk about it.
We make it that big so people realize that we're not making a
Which would
30-lane
be my
highway.
comment is, as soon as you draw it, it's somewhere. But this is what I heard you say.
Here's my thought.
Making it bigger, make it any less.
Makes it transparent, you make it transparent, 50% opaque.
Outside your road.
Yeah, we're along the line, you know, we're a town along the line. Something that is not the shape of a real road, right? And it makes it clear that we're talking about green connectivity here. Right?
With it
Say-
showing outside the urban growth boundary. If that's your concept, I mean, you could do anything you want in the concept plan. I think the answer to the would Metro and the state not approve, they actually don't have a formal approval role, but they
Acknowledge.
object. Is what they do. Yeah, they would.
Would they object to the entire thing or just to a piece of it?
They would object. So
They don't formally accept that they will reject.
And by the way, having Metro object is not necessarily bad.
Yeah.
They object to our plans on a regular basis.
So my suggestion would be, Gene, can I borrow the copy of that map? Is that the concept plan looks like what we've been working on, and that there is a separate description in the concept plan report that has some sort of diagram like that talks about needs north and south, talks about some of the input we've had, caveats, it says it's not specific, but it's not a proposal in the concept plan. It's a Sherwood idea.
So you're just talking about taking all the roads out of the concept plan.
On that idea, I think kind of what Gene said is the way to go. That the level of roads that we've shown here, knowing the role of Elwert, knowing what kind of basic connectivity we might have up in the north, knowing that the hilltop area has a continuous road, and that Hadley comes and connects north-south. All of those things are conceptual, but they're super helpful to getting the land use right and to knowing kind of how we're going to make this place walkable and alternatives and so on. Subnote on that, one of the best strategies for relieving Elwert is to have parallel connectivity that's local. So,
but local, meaning not necessarily for all that through traffic.
right.
Can I draw? I just want to make sure.
Please, let's
You can
keep,
draw.
let's keep
We'll
going.
both go.
Very interesting.
Watch out, it wants to fall over on you, but.
You know what I'm talking
Am I right? This is Roy, or this is 99, right? Or this is
That's Roy Rogers.
Yeah.
That's Roy Rogers.
coming in.
Yep.
And then we're gonna pretend like Old Schultz right comes in right here, right? Maybe.
Yeah.
Anyways, I'll work somewhere right here. The whole choke thing would be this. Again, I'm just making this up, but I thought of this the whole time. This is the traffic that's gonna come through, right? We also know we've got all that coming up. Choke, we already have choke, feed this down and through, choke it off, run that way. Don't let this connect to that. You get all of that fed out there still. These roads coming in. If I don't start, I'm gonna give it up. I'm gonna draw it. That's the most basic thought about just not allowing that to happen. Because that's the
So you're
industrial
pushing
area
it-
anyway. You run a
you're-
larger road through the industrial connect was already good.
So you're pushing it, you're pushing it over. That's what I thought. yeah.
Which is what our plan has been. I mean, to me, it's not either or. Like you push everything to Roy Rogers in '99 by the fact that you're going to reroute Elward and make it so it's not just a straight highway.
Right.
And you're going to have all kinds of other intersections off of Elward, right? And then probably longer term, you're still going to need the north-south connector. 20, 25 years down the road, but
The fat line.
yeah. But shorter term, it's going to be Roy Rogers in '99.
I mean,
So it looks like
yeah, comes in a little bit and down and make a trapezoid. Yeah, good.
So I think we need some broad stroke arrows. We have an arrow like this. We say this is a green. We have other arrows at the same concept. These are areas that right to your point.
Right. Right. Yeah. Okay. So, and yeah, I'm looking around the table too for, I mean, we've already got, be careful of the cords here. We've already got these on our plans, but generalize them more as things with arrows on the end of them.
It's conceptual.
Conceptual.
Yeah.
Okay, so make the road network we've done more conceptual. I'm not seeing this first diagram on this.
Well, I just didn't draw the other ones, but yes, you'd still have that future. You'd still have one over there. You got Roy Rogers as a broad swath. But you're color coding them and saying we want to reduce traffic. We want this to be more local. We want to encourage traffic to use these other routes.
Okay, we can take a run at that for your next meeting.
Let's make
We're gonna
sure
have to-
there's agreement first. So
I just wanted to know how, and you touched on this a little bit before, but how does leaving that broad idea with the wide swath of, general north-south connectivity benefit us on this plan? Like, as far as like, if it's approved, does that mean we have more options? Does it, I mean, I know you said it's to keep it in everybody's minds, but is there, what's the detriment of leaving it off, I guess?
Since I addressed that earlier, I'll make another attempt at it in a different way. It's kind of like these are big fights, right? Convincing the county that Elwood is no longer going to be a major arterial is a big fight. Convincing ODOT that we need more capacity on 99 is a big fight. So we have to line up all of our ducks, you know. And so if we having this concept in there is saying to ODOT and the county and Metro, our plan, our community, people want this. They want to find ways to get traffic around Sherwood and using the major roads and not cutting through our neighborhoods. And we're designing to that point. That's
But our
the benefit.
community and people definitely have said they don't really want that. So,
remember
They
in the
don't,
beginning,
they
though,
had, I don't, sorry.
well, sir, just in the beginning, we had people coming to us from Eddy Road saying, if you don't put something north-south, everybody's going to come down Eddy Road. We're going to have huge traffic issues there. So as we move that line, as we move that concept, we're just going to get different neighborhoods coming to us. So that's why we're trying to say this is a broad idea. It's going to happen in so many years from now. We're going after, it has to be on here for the state, the ODOC, everybody else. But we can't come up with the exact plan. It's a concept plan so that everybody understands it's a
thank you
concept
for
plan.
explaining just a little bit more. Appreciate it.
And thank you for bringing it up because Elwood needy citizens were at the beginning of this process.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
For an alternative north-south. And so now we have another community that has gathered its idea together to say, well, the north-south that Elwood needy wanted, we don't want, so let's put it back on Elwood needy. So I don't think there's a win there.
Right.
I think that,
There has to be a logical planning.
right, and I don't necessarily think, I don't know that we know that anyone is outright opposed to a future north-south somewhere in the west. Conceptually, they just don't want it on Eastview Road. Doesn't mean they don't want it somewhere else. I don't know. If it's somewhere here.
Everybody wants it somewhere else than their
Right,
place.
yeah, right. Like, I mean, conceptually, the whole point is we don't want Elwood to be another 99W splitting our town in half.
Right.
So we have to do something long-term to address that, and that's what we're trying to get at.
Put a third north-south right through the park, too, and then just have three small roads, Elwood needs to be Park Road. It's too far out to know exactly where it's happening, and that's what we're trying to say in this concept. We need to identify a north-south alternative has to be
Thought of.
thought of. And right.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to try another summary here. Basically, the two sheets that we drew here is what you want to see for transportation. The big, not site-specific, alternative north-south connection is needed, and then more generalized on the road network that we've drawn.
Yeah, big fat arrows, not specific roads with roundabouts and all that kind of stuff.
Okay. We're doing a little double checking on what the concept plan requirements are on this, so if you just give me 30 seconds. Did you find it, Kate?
See, I don't agree with that. I think we do need to.
Right. General locations are proposed.
But it's, in my
Mode
opinion,
function, general location.
when you're doing concept planning, and I think you guys brought this up, by putting a line on the map,
Two existing systems.
you don't know that that's actually going to be where those roundabouts and roads end up, right? So,
Okay.
so
All
what's
right.
the value? I'm trying. That's what I'm trying to think through.
I think our job is to put connectivity within this so that we have neighborhoods that are walkable. But what level do we say that it's a neighborhood street versus a major? Yeah. Right.
But we've got conceptual roads, so like we work from that level is, I think, the approach.
That was the point.
So if I'm hearing you right, maybe an idea is we leave those internal roads to service the areas in there, but for the regional perspective, where the cut through is happening in our goals with those, we use the big lines.
Yes.
And that's what we've been saying, I think,
Yeah,
all
yeah,
along, is that
yeah.
we have to keep neighborhood connections in there so that we understand whether neighborhood connections are good forward.
Well, and also on as far as Elward goes, I mean, we talked about this in one of our earlier meetings, and there was pretty overwhelming consensus that the realignment was the preferred option. So if we didn't have that on the map, we
That's
might
true.
decide
That's a
that.
really good point.
The alternative to a realignment on Elbert and EV is overpasses, which creates great separation.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well,
And
and it's,
I thought that was part of what we got out of the original.
and we have some significant environmental issues if we try to leave ED where it's at, because of the wetlands down there. Yeah. Or not ED, or ED and Elward, for that matter. Yeah.
Environmental and just
Yeah.
the fact that you're creating, instead of creating a winding road that potentially deter people from wanting to go down this road and force them back along Roy Rogers and Highway 99, we're also creating walkable Sherwood-esque communities by creating it without overpass.
So the closure is keep the fat line, keep the neighborhood connections, but generalize them as conceptual, and we'll bring back a map, a diagram that shows that.
The conceptual stuff should really focus on the regional aspect, right? It should talk about the traffic coming out of 99 or out of Yamhill County and those longer term planning issues.
Right, I was gonna add with descriptive text.
Yes.
And I think that
Right. Yeah.
Well, it goes all the way from Chapman all the way up to Chicken Creek. We need 3 or 4 of those type of south roads in the bottom 2 areas. Otherwise,
I agree 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For local, for
Yeah.
local
for
traffic,
local
yeah.
connection,
Which-
it's the crossing of Chicken Creek that becomes a conceptual loss, if it ever happens.
Okay. We might as well cover trails while we're talking about transportation. We've been pretty specific about trails. You got excited about trails, and because there's sort of some conceptual visioning. A trail along Chicken Creek, and our trail maps currently show the trail system from Sherwood West, eventually connecting all the way up to the refuge. So stay at that level
Yes.
for trails.
Yes.
Okay. Right. And we connected into town also.
And especially for Chicken Creek, because it's so wide, that that concept of keeping the trails on both sides, so it's equitable for people that live on either side of that. Keep that. I think we already have that in there, but I don't want to lose that either.
Yes. Yeah, there's lots of loops, and there's a really pretty cool trail plan that you all have created so far. Okay. All right. Well, that took a while, but I think it brought to closure what we're supposed to draw next and the thought behind it. So, okay to circle back to the agenda, and the next thing would be the developer tour summary. Is Chris still with us? There's Chris.
I am still here. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Chris, please introduce yourself and this item.
Yeah, good evening, everybody. My name is Chris Zajas. I am with Leland Consulting Group. We're part of the consulting team. Our work focuses on economic development and market analysis and real estate analysis. The short agenda item I have for you tonight is I'm going to be presenting some of the takeaways from a developer tour that we held on, I believe it was October 24th. And the purpose of that task was a little bit of a reality check to bounce some of the conceptual plan ideas off of some area developers and brokers who are active in the Sherwood area and very knowledgeable about the market, to give us some feedback as to whether our
kind of the viability of some of the plan elements, particularly focusing on the employment uses, the mixed employment areas, and the hospitality area in the southwest. So Erica was kind enough to chauffeur us around the study area. We made a couple stops. One was at the corner of Shoals and Roy Rogers Road, up where one of the main employment districts is planned. And then we also stopped down by the high school to take a look at the area where the hospitality district is planned.
Can I ask a quick question about the makeup of that group? Because you mentioned
Absolutely.
You mentioned developers that understand the area and the markets. Did we have a mix of not just developers that are focused on housing, but developers that are focused on jobs and hospitality? That third one is the one I'm really interested in.
Yeah, we actually had no one representing housing. The intent and the purpose of the tour was really to focus on employment. I would say we had someone from Braymore Development who represents more of retail and mixed-use development. They're the developers of the Vancouver Waterfront Project, if you're familiar with that. So they provided us some good insights into the hospitality side of things. But we didn't have any hotel developers or anyone directly representing the wine industry, although we have done some outreach elsewhere in the project on those points.
Okay, thank you.
And the remainder of the developers and brokers really represented more of the industrial side. And I'm not seeing slides. Are the slides showing up for you?
Nope. Just go ahead and speak from them. I think it's pretty.
Okay, well, I'll just speak to, because I know we're running late on the agenda, so I'll be pretty quick. First thing about the industrial market in general, big takeaway is the region is desperately short for industrial land, and as soon as this area could bring land to market, it would get absorbed pretty fast. The type of development that, and recognizing, of course, that that's still many years away with key infrastructure needing to be built and annexation and all of that. The type of industrial, we talked a little bit about that. This is not a location where we would expect to see significant distribution uses. It is far from I-5. It's not on even 99, and the developers confirmed that, like, yeah, you're not going to get the big discrete warehouse distribution uses that we're seeing constructed elsewhere in the region. That said, Sherwood is a desirable location. It's got a high quality of life. It's going to be adjacent to a lot of housing, both in Sherwood and to the north. And they would expect high demand for a pretty wide range of industrial users that would go into multi-tenant business parks. So maybe a high warehouse type building and with multiple tenants that might include contractors or small warehouse or wholesalers, small manufacturers, just a really diverse mix of employers, some related to the technology industry. We do know that there's growing interest in Sherwood and this part of the region for technology employment, particularly as the core Washington County area around Hillsborough is becoming very expensive. They had some good things to say about zoning in Sherwood. The EI zone is well regarded as a very flexible use, particularly compared to some of Sherwood's neighbors. And so overall, the feedback was very positive, and that the location, this was a little bit of a good confirmation for me, because my knee-jerk response is, oh wow, if you're not right on a major traffic corridor, that's not good for industrial. But in this case, it's actually well located, but it's going to be something a little bit different than maybe what you're seeing in Tonquin and certainly in, say, Tualatin, closer to I-5. We also talked a little bit about the hospitality zone. Ideally, there would be it's sort of a, I wouldn't say chicken or the egg, but it requires an anchor destination use. So That might be a winery, and if it were an authentic winery where there was actually wine production on site, that would be very desirable. Or it could be more of a destination resort like the Allison is in Newburgh. And kind of the flip side of that is that while all of those things are great, the idea of off-site tasting rooms is becoming much more accepted in the marketplace, and those can be a destination too. And in fact, if you create a cluster of them, that can kind of create that sense of place. The topic of infrastructure came up a lot, of course. The developers love certainty, and they love to see where those lines are on the map, so they know where infrastructure is going to be built. Roads and utilities are the most important piece of that. And from there, the conversation shifted into a little bit more of a focus on implementation and how we would actually get there. The couple key points that we talked about during the tour, and we had a debrief afterward, was developing a funding strategy for infrastructure is going to be very, very important. It's particularly in today's economy where the cost of infrastructure is just going through the roof and inflation is present. Having a plan of how that's going to be financed, ideally with financing tools that might alleviate the burden of a developer to front load all of the infrastructure on their own dime. So if there were tools like urban renewal, special assessment districts, things like that, they'd be very interested in seeing that. And that's what an infrastructure funding plan would do. It'd start to flesh out all the costs and the revenues and timing and phasing and figure out a strategy to get that built. Just a couple other points before I wrap up. They recommended highly that a wetlands inventory be done. That's another kind of a barrier and an unknown that developers would want to see removed before going ahead. And then, just kind of in closing, it was a very positive conversation because Sherwood is a desirable place where jobs and development would want to be, but really the development is there to provide the jobs, and it's the employers that see Sherwood as a desirable place, and it has a good brand, good image within the region. And boy, just to reiterate one last time, really the quicker, as quickly as this plan come to fruition and that land be made available for employment development, the better. The region is really desperate for it, and paraphrasing their words. But as a market analyst, we see that too. The land is really in short supply, and so that bodes well for the timing and speed of the development of the plan. And with that, I'll let you get back to the agenda unless there's some questions.
Questions of Chris?
So on the hospitality zone, you kind of mentioned a couple of triggers that would make it more successful, like a winery or something. Is there another label that would work rather than hospitality zone that would get a desired result to having a focal point so that we get the correct zoning? Is there another zone in like even Bend area or some area that is successful that we could mirror here that would create that nexus?
That's a good question. I think from a zoning point of view, which is down the road from where this concept plan is at, I think probably not. Like probably some mixed-use retail commercial zone would ultimately be the proper zoning for these kinds of uses. But at the concept plan level, to kind of characterize the type of place that it's going to be, I think hospitality zone is okay. I think maybe destination tourism is a kind of what comes to mind. And that rings true from what the developers told us, which is you really need a destination to anchor it. It's probably not going, whether that's like a McMenamin's type resort or the Allison, you need something that's the catalyst. It's probably not going to fulfill your visions of a tourist-oriented district, one small restaurant and one small tasting room at a time. There's going to be something that sort of catalyzes that and makes that kickstart. And to me, that sounds like destination. So I like the idea of having destination be part of the verbiage that we use.
Yeah, if I could add, one of the reasons we've been talking about that zoning type, and that's an interesting idea, by the way, that name change, I like that, is if we just zone it for mixed use, we're going to get mixed use. So we're actually talking about making specifically driving zoning types that kind of force the economics in terms of what type of development goes in there. So that's one of the reasons. We're also talking about it for housing too, like cottage cluster only zoning.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the, again, that's outside of what we're doing here, but that's kind of the longer term thinking that we're thinking about.
Yeah, and I guess I would add to that, I think, zoning is just one of the tools in the city's toolkit to make things happen and make economic development happen. I think, driving a tourism-oriented hospitality district is definitely something that's going to have to go beyond zoning alone to make it happen. There would have to be recruitment and branding and telling the story and finding that catalytic developer or entrepreneur or winemaker or hotelier or whoever it is that makes it happen. And for those of you who know the story of how the Allison got built, it wasn't a market-driven chain hotel that just saw an opportunity and expanded. It was very driven by the passions of the family and wanting to create a legacy for the city. And it's finding those people that are going to be the right fit for Sherwood and hoping that they're out there. And then, it's the job of the city and developers as well to lure them and attract them to the opportunity. And so the zoning can certainly help preserve that opportunity to make sure that you then if you land that ideal opportunity, that you have a place for them.
Yeah, and the other piece you mentioned before that's a big part of that is the funding plan, and what that, whether it's special assessment zones or, and one of the reasons I want to bring this up for this committee is, you may not know this, but we actually managed to get an earmark in the federal budget for $3 million for a road in the Tonquin employment area to cut through there to open up some of that land. So we're constantly looking to bring our tax dollars back here. So.
And mindful of the time here, we probably ought to move on to the next agenda item, if that's okay.
Thank you.
Thank you for waiting.
Yeah, that was
Thanks,
great.
Chris.
Thank you.
Can we go back to the PowerPoint?
Yeah.
There it is.
It worked.
Magic.
Right. So, well, no, let's just do this quickly and then bring up the traffic analysis, which we kind of talked about the conclusions of it already. But in your packet was a memo from us that is sort of the qualitative look at the alternatives compared to the goals and evaluation criteria that were originally developed in your first meetings. So let's move past the maps. I think we've even moved past the metrics here. Those are in your packet. So we use sort of a consumer's reports kind of style here, like was done in the preliminary concept plan. Of the 6 goals, the first one is about the area being a natural extension of Sherwood. And you use the specific terms about small town feel. So it looked like to us that alternative 1 was kind of closest to that particular goal because it had most of the broad areas residential use throughout the area. The second criterion had to do with the variety of businesses and employment opportunities. We scored those all as a full moon because frankly, they all provide good jobs. It's just different ways of going about it. So alternative one, more of an emphasis on mixed employment. And then by the time you get to alternative three, you've got more of the mixed use and the use of the Kruger Road area and so on. Transportation, we hadn't done the analysis yet, so that's just a TBD. Kate, why don't you pick up on the other two?
And then in terms of parks and natural areas, the number 4, you know, all of the alternatives really support that goal pretty strongly. And our alternative 2 was rated the highest just because it has the most total park acreage, with 2 larger community parks kind of placed on the map. Number 5 is about, you know, robust network of active transportation options, and really there's really no difference between the 3 alternatives in terms of the trail network and, you know, sidewalks and that kind of connectivity. So those all rated highly. And then the last one is about well-planned and an area that's implementable and pragmatic. Planning and implementation is pragmatic. And again, you know, all 3 alternatives kind of support that goal pretty well. I think alternative 2 has the largest total amount of hospitality zone, and that was kind of one area that it's not totally clear how pragmatic it really is, just based on the fact that it's kind of a new concept. We don't know what the market is for the types of uses that we're talking about for that zone, so it rated just a little bit lower than 1 and 2 in that regard.
Agenda-wise, my suggestion would be bring up the transportation analysis and then time for discussion. We'll go through the little interactive poll on that. Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Carl, if you please introduce yourself.
Thanks. Hi there. You've already talked about my part for so long. I don't know what more I could say. So I'm Carl Springer with DCAS Associates. I've helped the team do some initial analysis on the traffic impact piece. What we're going to talk about tonight, you've covered some of this, so I'll go on some of it lightly and some of it we'll dwell a little bit longer. But the pieces that we've looked at so far is how the planning that you're looking at now compares with some of the prior work. As a guy who's done a lot of transportation planning in this part of the world, I'm interested in how it differs over time, so we can think about how it's going to affect the region, not just this particular spot in the world. So we'll get some numbers on that, and then we'll look at what it means in terms of how it operates and what the impacts are that we've found so far. Next slide. So those are the numbers that the team has already shown you. The first 2 rows you're familiar with. So Alts 1, 2, and 3, households, jobs, we aggregate them together for our purposes. The next row is our estimate of vehicle trips. So that's the total number within the entire planning area of how many vehicles trips in the PM peak hours. So 6,000, 6,700, 6,700. So from my point of view, those are very similar numbers, right? So they're not strongly ones much. Usually we get a bigger range when we're looking at alternatives, but in this case they're pretty similar. So what that means is that whichever way you go, the scale of the impacts are going to be pretty similar. I think that's the conclusion there. So next slide. Also wanted to highlight, there was a prior study led by the county that looked at urban reserve areas throughout Washington County, and we said, well, okay, because the question being asked in that study is, what happens if all these pending UGB areas come in? What does that mean for us as the county? And the last column there just shows the assumptions that were made for Sherwood West. So what's interesting is that it was a lot more housing, a lot less jobs, but roughly about the same level of trip intensity, roughly.
So can I ask a question about that?
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, because that just seems insane. How can you have 6,400 homes and only 544 job-related trips? Am I missing that?
No, it's not 500. The first 2 rows are not trips. That's the number of jobs.
Oh, I got you.
The number of houses. The last row is the number of trips.
So each one of those houses is only making what,
less, right? So,
In Sherwood with all our kids.
right. Well, that's, yeah. When you have condos and apartments and those kinds of things, they don't generate one trip in the peak hour. It's less on average. Trust me. 30 years here. 30 years I've done
Maybe
this.
when school
Trust
gets out
me.
is not PM peak hours, though.
That's true. It's not the PM
That's
peak
right,
hour.
that's not-
PM peak hour is 5 to 6.
So the unit time associated with the trips is what?
Well, I don't know exactly what hour, but typically in Sherwood it's probably, I would say 5 to 6 or 5:30 to 6:30, somewhere in there.
Well, the reason I'm coming from it, just I apologize, is today we have, 6,700 housing units approximately in Sherwood. And if you go to the census on the map, we have 9,000 people commuting outside of Sherwood for their jobs. So
Okay.
that's 2 trips.
Right.
18,000 for 6,700 homes. And they got us at 6,400. So from the Sherwood demographics, that just makes no sense to me.
Okay.
Yes, the green
Green
column.
column.
That was Washington County.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'm not talking,
Right.
It may be more
Yeah, they did-
true with more jobs.
it could be, but it's a lot of
Right.
jobs, yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, my rationale for this wasn't the argument about the trip per household, it was the trips per jobs. You had a lot more jobs in the current planning that you're looking at, so that really compensated for those two. So, all right.
And
fair.
Washington County's probably looking at our old concept plan.
Yes.
Well, yeah. That was a few years ago. Right. Yeah. It doesn't include any of the current stuff. Right. Yeah, that was a few years ago. Right. Okay. Next slide. I'm not sure this is relevant anymore after the discussion we've already had, frankly. Not really sure. But let me say it anyway. So one thing to bear in mind with any kind of concept planning, we as transportation planners, we really need lines on maps, because it's hard to plan a street system and answer the question, will this work okay or not? Right? If I don't make some kind of assumption about what's going on the streets, I can't answer that question. So I get the idea that you want to look at a concept, a corridor outside of this concept plan area. That's fine, but for our purposes, we need to make some kind of assumption, at least for the major streets. The neighborhood streets, there's a lot more flexibility about what shape those can be. And the city already has standards about the spacing and those kinds of things anyway, so it's not like, that doesn't come out of whole cloth. There are guidelines for that already. But what I wanted to say about this, so as the concept plan unfolds, once you go through the approval process and pick one, development occurs, as it incrementally gets built, most of the streets in the greater planning area, whether they be new or existing, will be upgraded to urban levels, right? I mean, that's what's going to happen. So I know in my experience, what the mistake that a lot of people make is they look at the roads that they are out there today, and they try to imagine all this growth, and they're in their mind, they're thinking all this growth is going to happen on the road that I'm seeing today. That's what I'm telling you is the mistake. It's not going to be the same road. They're going to be new and improved roads. So for example, Elward, those 3 that are listed on the bullets, Joel, Sherwood, Elward, Edie, Kruger, those will all be upgraded to current urban standards, like the Sunset Drive vision. That'll be continuous throughout the entire concept planning area. So just wanted to emphasize that point. All right, next slide. Skipping forward to the future. So the future, we just skip ahead clear to the end. We say, okay, what happens when all this builds, right? It's going to take years to happen, but just skipping ahead to the end, what we found was, given those assumptions about what the street system will look like, where we're assuming all the major roads are 3 lanes, so 1 lane in each direction with a center turn lane. I know there's lots of cases where you want a center turn lane today and it's not there, but eventually you'll get those. And for all the local roads, the neighborhood roads, those will be 2 lanes, 1 lane in each direction, right? So what we found is that given the growth estimates and the alternatives, the street systems will work okay. Yes, ma'am.
Elward and Edie and Kruger are the 3 major roads that you've identified within the plan area that will be improved to 3 lanes.
Right.
And all of the roads, conceptually or in reality, are planned to be 2 lanes.
Well, the neighborhoods and local streets is what I'm referring to specifically.
Right, so everything else, and
Right.
that include a second connection across Chick
the snapshot that we looked at before the discussion tonight did include the north-south connection. There's a slide on that yet. I'll talk about that in a minute. Yes, you are. I know. Fair enough. So, a couple points. So one is, obviously upgrade to full urban standards, but then there's a listing there of a few other intersections that need some special attention. So obviously, Elward, Edie, as they are today, wouldn't operate adequately with that kind of growth, right? You need some improvements there. The concept that I looked at and was based this discussion on was the fact that it would be the offset alignment of Elward, and you'd have two roundabouts, so that's why that's listed the way it is. We typically budget somewhere around $2 to $3 million for a roundabout, but given the constraints and all the environmental stuff going on there, might be more. We'll see. Also wanted to point out that the other intersections further south down by the high school, Hanley and Haiti, as development occurs, the city already has traffic impact study guidelines in place, and so you'll be looking at the safety needs there. And as upgrades need to be done, as signals need to be put in, or protected pedestrian crossings need to be put in, those things will happen. That's not something we're going to dictate as a part of the concept planning process. All right.
A question about your subject. How did you build in traffic, the traffic coming out of Yamhill County, growth in those areas? How is that built into this?
Oh, good point. So the tool that we use to do all these forecasts is the Washington County model, is a travel demand model. Well, we basically use it for all the concept planning on the whole west side. I've used it in all the studies that I've done here, River Terrace, Kingston Terrace, Cooper Mountain, on up the road. So we include all those regional destinations. So we include traffic from Yamhill County in that mix, if that's your specific concern.
Well, that's my question.
All right.
Yeah.
Those are in the mix, and so the work we've done so far is a relatively high level. I mean, typically we dig down a little bit deeper in terms of analysis, but right now we've got this finding. Let's see, where am I here? Oh yeah, the north-south connector, very hot topic tonight. So we did evaluate that. We looked at the connector between Chapman and Edie. We found that it wasn't particularly active. It functioned a lot more like a collector than an arterial. Somewhere between 2,000 and 4,000 vehicles a day. And if you're not familiar with, anybody who's not familiar with vehicle volumes, that's not very much. That's neighborhood scale volumes. Arterials are 10 to 15 to 20,000 a day. So 1 or 2 or 3 or 4,000 a day is not very much in terms of that. And a couple other comments that tended to be local road users were on that street as opposed to regional road users. Regional road users were doing what they do today, which is turn on the Elward and go north, right? That's what they do.
Is that with the overpass connection?
It was, well, to be clear, the overpass that's being discussed, at least I think still, at Brookman, it's not at Brookman. It's offset from Brookman, and it doesn't intersect with the highway. It's to connect one side of Sherwood to the other side of Sherwood. It's not an interchange.
It's not pulling people off of 99.
No, you could do it, but it's not very convenient at all. So it's not the expressway style of overpass. It's really just a 2-lane road with bike lanes, so you can get across the highway without having to mess with signals and all the traffic. That's a simple way of saying it, I suppose. So that was in it. Yeah, the predominant route is to just pull off at Sunset and go up Elward. I did a little bit of analysis in that, and that is a very popular. So if you're coming from Roy Rogers and trying to go south on 99 in the Yamhill County, about 80% of the traffic goes down Elward as opposed to goes down 99. That's about how it breaks down. That sound right?
It needs to go on.
So does the
Well,
realignment-
I'm not going to debate that. Yeah, I'm not going to debate the merits of it or whether that's right. But it is a county arterial, and you're right. If you want to change it from an arterial to something other, that's a whole separate discussion. That'll take some work, I can tell you that. So I think that. Well, you know, the other comment about that, so I know because I've been a part of this conversation for a while. So one of the things we looked at was who's using that stretch of Elward, you know, in terms of how long are they really driving, and because I think the way that offset works, so you're moving that intersection, splitting into two, moving in about a quarter mile, I think is what I measured, something like that. So you're adding maybe a half a mile or so to the route, roughly. Well, the trips that go down, do that thing I was describing, that's on average 10 miles. So if they're driving 10 miles already, will deflection of half a mile really make them want to go some other way? The people that drive down Elwert Road, north-south, they're on average are driving 10 miles from A to B.
Right.
So if you move it by half a mile, are you really going to say, is the little phone on their dash going to say, hey, you should go a different way so you can save a minute, basically? I'm not questioning the desire. I understand the desire to get them off of that. I'm just saying.
Your model assumed that specific alignment in the plan, right?
Alignment.
Right.
So if you designed it differently, you might be able to capture more traffic on that road.
On which road? On Elward Road?
Bypass that we're talking about.
Oh, the bypass. Well, yeah. If it went somewhere, I mean, if it's got to go further north of Edie, right? It's got to go up to Shoals Sherwood, at least, and ideally, it'd go all the way to Shoals Ferry or River Road or whatever it's called, due north of there, right? I mean, if you're going to do this thing called a bypass, you actually have to bypass the whole deal and make it attractive. So that is, by the way, that I could get a heretic license as a transportation planner in Oregon talking about the word bypass out loud.
Unfortunately, we got to bring it back. Did the model?
Right. Yeah, there's all kinds of obstacles with that, for sure.
Let's keep it rolling here.
Did your model include the expected improvements to traffic flow at Roy Rogers and 99 once all that widening projects that's currently under construction is done?
Not specifically, but yeah. No, not specifically. The widening of Roy Rogers, yeah. Well, actually, no, I take that back. It would have included the widening of Roy Rogers all the way down, yeah.
The funded projects are assumed.
Funded projects are assumed in all those forecasts.
It's in construction.
Right. Well, yeah, that's definitely funded if it's under construction. No, I get that.
I'm
Yeah.
just,
No,
I'm curious how much
regionally
traffic-
speaking, it's a forecast for the year 2040. So anything that's in the pipeline through the regional transportation plan that's committed funding is already assumed to be in there. So all the 217 improvements that are going on and everything else on 26, all that's assumed in those forecasts.
Okay. Surprised that doesn't pull more of the traffic to 99.
Right. Fair enough.
Anything on trucks, Carl? Did you?
Well, we did some analysis on trucks because there's been a fair bit talk about trucks. So in my world, there's two kinds of trucks. There's the big interstate style trucks, the heavy duty trucks. They aren't very attracted to Elward Road. They don't go that way. They either stay on 99 or they go down 12 on Sherwood Road, pretty much. They have no interest. There's no destinations over there on that side of the county that they're interested in. So those are not the people that you're interested in. The people that you're interested in are the medium scale trucks. So I put a marker south on 99 south of Sunset, and I said, show me all the trucks that hit this marker and where they go. And there was about 8,000 of them a day, and about 10% of them went on Elward. The rest went due north. Yeah, about 800 a day out of about 10,000 or so on Elward.
Talking like delivery trucks.
Any type of, it could be a delivery truck, it could be any kind of truck because they were mostly local regional destinations, whereas the big trucks, they have interstate destinations, right? They're going to Seattle or they're going to the Gorge or whatever. So there is truck activity. I personally, I don't see the merits of the North-South Connector 4 truck utility the way it's currently envisioned with a limited little connection. I don't see them detouring out of their way 2 miles to make that. That
with tolling on I-5 and the potential diversion that we could see coming up 99 West?
Yeah, I'm not sure I know the answer to that question. I know that's, I don't know where that sits in terms of committed projects. I know they're currently doing it. I just don't think it's in the forecast.
And I think the short answer is it's really not in anybody's models yet.
I don't think so, yeah.
Because ODOT hasn't gotten there.
ODOT doesn't want it in anybody's models yet.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. Okay, any
Anything
last
else
questions
for the
on
traffic guy?
transportation of Carl here?
It's hopeful. Thank you.
All right,
Okay.
thank you.
Committee members, how are we doing on
Good to see
energy?
you.
Can we do the last 30 minutes here and get some land use direction?
If you
Okay,
need a cookie, there's some back on the back table.
help yourself to a cookie. The next agenda item, we need some direction on land use. We've talked a lot about transportation, but we do need some direction on land use. So Kate's going to walk you through how to connect here, and we're going to do a little just online polling.
Yeah, so hopefully you all brought your phones with you or a tablet, and you can access the internet in some way, and go to menti.com. And then you should just have a little box where you can type in this code that's on the screen here. And then I'll give you all a minute to do that before switching over.
And just a request of our visitors, don't log on, if you could, please, because it'll mess up our counts here.
Yeah, just for the CAC. All right, I'm going to switch over. The code will still be visible on the screen, but let me get this started. Oh, wait. Wait. Oh, people are already taking it. Okay.
Yeah.
That's what happened.
Faster than you think.
Okay.
We do things without being told.
We're on it.
So, we've only got six people participating so far. So I'm going to give everyone a chance to.
Cake crowd needs to step it up.
Is everybody connected
rough.
okay?
Have cake.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah. Should have 9.
We've got 7, 8.
I is dominating.
You're not doing it?
Oh.
You want to borrow a phone?
Yeah, do you want to borrow mine?
Let's get Gene connected. Yeah, we had a carrot cake discussion.
Oh, they did? Okay.
Some cakes that are good. Yeah, but it's like 1 in 20.
Here we go.
All right.
Okay. So it's working.
So what we want to do is go back to the alternatives, kind of forget the transportation for a moment, but the land use direction, alternative 1 was sort of where we started, frankly, with mixed employment, lots of purple, mixed employment, and mixed with some residential, nestled in Chicken Creek area there. By the way, the bottom of the map is Edie, the top is Shoal, Sherwood, and Roy Rogers is on the right. So this is the North District. Alternative 2, you might recall, that group mixed up the land uses more. More of the residential choices in the middle of the area. And then alternative 3 was just sort of a variation on what 1 was. So take a look at these. Take a sec to kind of what's going the right direction for you. Okay, get that in mind. Let's go to the polling. So pick an alternative. takes a few minutes for everybody to do their thing, so go ahead.
Did you vote, Tim?
Looks like we got 3 who are still thinking. There we go, 9 people. Okay, so preference for alternative 1. Let's go back to the maps. Just a couple of comments on why you like 1 better. Is it the job focus?
That would be for me, yeah, job focus.
That's somebody else.
Job focus in the park.
Job focus and the just lack of industrial land in the whole region.
Okay, all right. Get notes, good. All right. Did anything jump out that you would want to kind of mix with 1 from the others? You don't have to, but just in case there was.
Go ahead. You go.
The concept of buffering south of south of Sherwood to the existing farmland to the west kind of intrigued me of putting residential,
Right.
keeping that little residential block up there at the north, or less intense, because then we're creating a transition from employment.
To a transition zone.
And create a transition zone up on that.
Transition along the west side. That's interesting because there's actually kind of a rise up there where those tree farms are.
Yeah. And then
Or a park.
or a park, but making a transition from farmland to employment land.
Yeah, that's why I voted, one of the reasons I voted for 3 was that buffering.
Okay.
That,
All right.
the very
That's-
top of 3, and then the next section down on 2. All. Yeah.
We'll take a look at that western edge then for buffer and park and, okay. All right, that's good direction on the north. Let's go, I think far west is up next. So just geographically, Edie Road is the line that's going through the top third. Eastview is on the west edge. And you can see Chicken Creek here. So it's the land north and west of Chicken Creek. Alternative 1 was more the low density model. It's the lowest of our choices throughout the area, except for a cottage area that was, you see in brown. And then alternative 2 mixed in a little bit more medium density, actually medium density throughout the non-hilltop area. And then alternative 3 went a step further of some medium density and some medium high. So thinking about kind of existing homes, existing topography, these types of characteristics of the alternatives, pick the one you think is going the right direction for you. Let's do a poll. Okay, pretty strong. Oh, we got one more. Okay. So pretty strong direction towards alternative 1. I'm going to guess just the low density nature of it was a consideration for many of you. What was attractive about 2 for those that looked at 2?
And there's parks in all 3 of them.
Yeah, that's a smaller park with the little green star.
Yeah, sorry, it's a little washed out. I'm not quite sure why we labeled one and not the others. Might have just two stars together. Yeah.
So for 2, the park was the same issue, but my preference would be low density all through there with the park, because I just think it's far enough out. The topography is more is more viable for low density.
Right. Okay. getting a couple head nods. Okay, so we'll take a look at more of a consolidated couple of parks than separated.
It is across Edie though, that's the only thing. So the people south of Edie wouldn't necessarily go over, just logistically.
We also, you know, the parks are going to end up where they are. This is not intended to be, yeah, we had to draw them somewhere, but these aren't intended to be super site specific, other than the community level park. So you see the one at the bottom of the screen, those need more land.
Yeah, I think when you realize how parks get, and Gene is very familiar with this, how parks get funded and built, you know, outside of the large community parks, we don't have a ton of control over exactly where they go. And the reality is fiscally, it's probably not feasible, you know, for us to have 3 large format parks in the entirety of Sherwood West. I mean, 1, maybe 2 if we're lucky. You know, when we only have one in town right now, right? So,
Community scale park.
I'm talking like the large scale park, right? So I think we have to be a little realistic too about what. Also, like think about for a lot of people, there's advantages to having a bigger park, like you know. But there's also like then if you have more bigger parks and less smaller parks, then a lot more people are now a lot further from the park.
I think that
So there's a trade-off.
I think maybe they don't mean something so huge. I think they just mean like the Lindley, yeah. Pioneer, yeah.
You know, going back to this is a concept plan, so it informs the city, because we're, right now, you know, we're banking land. You know, we just bought a property off Roy Rogers that will probably become a park someday. So we're always looking into the future, and when properties come available, occasionally we have landowners that say, I want my property to become a park. So that will drive some of it, but as for planners and for the city looking at areas where they need to go after parkland, this is useful.
Okay. All right, sounds like we got a direction on far west. Let's go to the west district again, just geographically. On the right part of the pictures is Elward. You can see the high school in white, so Kruger south of it, and then Edie at the top of the map. So alternative 1 has the most area of medium density. I sort of thinking of it as matching up to the neighborhoods that are built on the east side of Elwert, or at least most similar to those, but introduces a few more new housing choices. Has a community level park at what somebody called the Sand Trap property there next to the creek. Then when you get to alternative 2, that group, oh, and one more thing about alternative 1 is, even though it's off the map, it's what all 3 groups did was think about Kruger as a destination, as having more than just housing. So you see the colors there. Alternative 2, that group started to look at the north side of Kruger as being part of that Kruger corridor. So the brown is cottage, the red is mixed, right? Pretty sure. Mixed use. So a little mixed use node with some cottage cluster, and then some medium density housing north of the high school. So introducing some more housing and variety to the area. I should mention the top of the hill is low density in all these. And then finally, alternative 3, that group really looked at the whole, I'll call it the whole edge around, the ring around the high school on the west, the north, and along the Kruger corridor as having new land uses introduced into it, whether they're employment or whether they are multifamily or whatever they are. So that's the array of choices there. So take a little time to study those. Let's leave the maps up for a minute, because this area is That is what Chris called flex space. So picture a big building that has some office uses in it, people in there like design engineers, designing drift boats, and in the rest of the building they're building drift boats. That's a kind of a classic use of flex
A lot
space.
of what we're seeing up on 12th and Sherwood.
Yeah, it's nice light industrial. 12th and Sherwood are pretty big flex
Big,
space
right.
buildings mixed in with warehousing. So downsize what you see on 12th and Sherwood a little bit, and that's what we're talking about. Okay, so had enough
Looking
time
at
to.
that as more of a mixed-use retail, but maybe I was misremembering.
Well,
I thought it was more like restaurants, shops kind of things.
It can have restaurants and shops in it, but the purple mixed employment is primarily flex space.
Okay, my bad. I thought we were talking about the red.
And the red is exactly what you said.
Okay,
Yeah.
my bad. Yeah. And through zoning, right? So that you wouldn't in that purple zone, you wouldn't be able to open up a retail store. Wouldn't be allowed. Yeah, yeah.
All right. Ready to poll? Let's see where we are. Okay, pretty even, slight tip towards 2. What was attractive about whichever one you voted for? So you went for 2 for those reasons.
Yeah, same. I like 2 because I thought it might be kind of nice at some point if adjacent to the high school there you had some, maybe there's places kids can go to lunch, or something like that, with some, and I like the cottage cluster as well. In the north, yeah, Chick-fil-A, as well as in the north. Yeah, so that was it for me.
Securing our middle housing and cottage clusters and doing an alternative to than leaving it open with medium density high.
Yeah.
Because with the house building, you don't know what you'll end up with, but if you have cottage clusters and more defined.
And I like the idea that the cottage cluster areas are kind of clusters of clusters, right? So it can become a really cool community. Like if you think about it on a bigger scale, right? Instead of it's just 8 or 16 units, that it's actually maybe 40 or 100 units that are all kind of interwoven together. It could be a really neat thing. Obviously, the market.
That was my thoughts on alternative 2. I like the fact that it had a lot of cottage clusters. I also like the fact that we don't have multifamily along Elward, because I don't want that to turn into what happened at Roy Rogers, because they tend to put the high density stuff right on the roads and the low density outside.
Okay. So I think we're headed towards 2, at least mostly from the comments. Is there anything from 1 that we want to be specific about that we would capture in 2, or an adjustment to 2?
I voted on 1, but I like the cottage cluster in the top of 2, but I don't like the cottage cluster in the bottom of 2. That was my only thought there.
You think it's too much cottage clusters? Or bad location?
Yeah, and does cottage cluster in around the high school kind of help out? I like the cottage cluster. I don't know, picturing walkable, maybe not senior housing, but older people living in the smaller houses and stuff like that. You bring them right into the high school.
Yeah,
so
makes
that's the way I think I really like one I really like the combination of you just took the one cottage cluster by the high school out.
I don't see cottage clusters as just like senior living though. I see that.
My problem is that's what I'm looking at it for.
Those are going to be a little less expensive, so there may be, it's got different appeals. So it's not just.
That's why I just on my thought process of looking at it, I saw that as a 2-bedroom place, stuff like that.
Yeah.
I kind of like the cottage there because it's walkable into the hospitality zone.
All that stuff down below.
So,
That's what I'm hoping is the next map. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's where I was hoping the cottage cluster was in the next one down.
So why don't we hold it for the draft that we'll put together, and you can have another discussion when you see it all put together in a map. Okay. Well, it was a sort of an assumption for these maps that the committee directed, since we don't know site specifically what land will actually end up being schools. And the good input from the school district was, we don't think we need one for 10 plus years down the road. The idea was, let's just put it in the legend, but not be specific about where they are in the study area. Right.
Similar to the roads issues. If we put a school on someone's property, all of a sudden, you're not getting a school property here. Blah, blah,
We
blah.
can't put a school anyway.
and schools are like parks.
Yes.
Yeah.
So they're allowed by the zoning. We've identified the need, which is the key part of the concept plan. Okay, so we got alternative 2 on the West District. So wrapping up Southwest, I think alternative 1, I think of it as having more of a housing and jobs focus south of Kruger, as opposed to mixed use. There's a little bit of commercial and mixed use next to 99. But then the other kind of key factor of it is its hospitality zone is on Chapman on the western 2/3. It's kind of going up the hill and getting up to the top of the hill there, and then filling in housing in between. Nice little cottage cluster area up there at the west boundary.
Focusing kind of commercial nodes and
Yep. Alternative 2 has a little different vision in that along Kruger, help me out, Kate, the 2 colors.
we have multifamily, orange, mixed use.
Mixed use. Right. Right. So that's the mixed use near the high school kind of concept. Visibility from 99 is a part of that site. It's really the land that is on the east side of the church, frankly, because the church is basically a keeper property. But then the hospitality zone along Chapman goes from 99 all the way west. It's the most kind of amount of land of that. And then alternative 3, then alternative 3 from Chapman running along 99 took a mixed employment kind of approach and put the hospitality in a different location at Kruger 99. So these are really pretty different concepts. Study these for a minute. Kind of think about pros and cons and your preference.
Can anybody give me a background of why we put a little tiny mixed family use right above the hospitality zone, just like a little,
As a buffer, I think.
to have it
Multifamily to buffer from that hospitality into the lower density housing, I think, if I remember correctly.
okay. It's just on that one, right? On alternative 2. It just, I just don't understand why. I mean, I understand that, but I don't understand why I was just looking for a background why we chose a little pocket of multifamily right there by the hospitality zone or the destination. What's the
Destination tourism.
yeah?
Let's call it hospitality zone for now. Brand it later. Okay. All right. Let's do the poll.
This is the
I
one
kinda
where
wanna
I
combine them
just
all.
don't like any of them. Never have. I know.
Is it coming back again?
Yeah.
Everything comes around here again.
I would say if you don't like any of them, then let's talk about it for a couple of minutes after we poll here and see where we go. Maybe some of your
the
committee
right
members
one. I
will
did.
talk you into something.
Oh, I made the choice along with the majority of the committee members here.
I'm in your shoes though.
You what?
I'm in your shoes.
Yeah.
Okay, so 2 is the preferred one, and I'm going to guess a strong part of that is the hospitality zone along the south edge. A couple heading off there. What else about 2 or any of them?
What was the margin? I didn't see the final.
7 of you preferred alternative 2.
I had one. I thought maybe the amount of hospitality zone in 2 is too ambitious.
Depends on how we define it.
Yeah, I'm just telling you my thoughts.
Yeah, no, I'm just thinking about it.
And
It was from 2 meetings ago. That got expanded. That wasn't, if I recall right, and I'm pointing at you.
I drew it.
You drew that 2 meeting, the meeting before the open house, because that was low density housing. I thought on the
We
on
had
the
it
left
turned
side.
on the side. We put it up that way.
Okay, oh, was that it got spun
Yeah.
down?
Well, I took I like the hospitality away from 99 a little bit and leaving the commercial and the employment all along there.
yeah,
And then you get the employment beside the high school, and then that cottage in the back corner. That's what I was liking about 1. So
I kind of like aspects of both 1 and 2. Like to me, it's like I don't think either one is ideal. I don't think so.
It's the
I mean, we
least
can't have 3
feasible
community
of the
parks.
ones that we've colored in, frankly.
it's also not where we want it to be.
It's just from a cost perspective.
I like the employment on 1, just to catch the people from Newburgh coming up to our employment and coming south to the employment at the top. Where I didn't see enough employment on 2, we're kind of now pushing all our employment to the top, which means we're gonna have a lot more traffic through Sherwood coming from south. So that's or shrinking hospitality.
Yeah, but if you're, sorry, if you remember the last concept plan we had, that hospitality area in 2 was very similar to that. And that was one of the most positively responded to areas from the original concept plan was that area, because it would act as not only its own, but also a gateway down to the wine country there. Yeah.
There were a lot.
No, I'm talking about the original one, the original concept plan. They had that they had exactly.
It was characterized as gateway to the wine
Right,
country.
right. But the same concept, same area, and people really like that.
Does anybody have any like thought about the amount of jobs that hospitality brings in relation to an employment zone? I mean, do we
So
have
we
any?
did
concept
some
of-
research.
Okay.
It's pretty hard to peg them. We compiled information from the Allison, from Edgefield, and a couple of other sources, and it came out. We thought the average was about 15 jobs per acre. The mixed employment, I think, is actually about in the same vicinity of 15 to 20 per per acre. It depends how much office you have in that flex building.
How big is the acreage in that section in alternative 2 in the hospitality section? 80 is my guess. High school's 60. Yeah, so it's 80 to 100 or something like that. Okay.
Pretty big.
It's a lot. So it
What also?
it would not be all jobs, frankly. It would have open spaces and vineyard and yeah, exactly. Destination kinds of attractions.
National mountain bike course. I got you.
Well, that's 5 jobs.
Yeah, that's fine. 5 jobs with 4
You're not
million
building
people
that for
coming.
jobs, though.
No, right.
The tourists
So
coming in, right? That's
the
the idea is
only-
we're bringing tourists, right?
Right.
And
The
that's
only
why I'm just worried about, we have to support those tourists. So you can bring them to something, but if they don't want that spot, they need to go to pick something up at the commercial area or something else.
The only specific change I'm sort of hearing out of the ideas is rethink the park.
Park won't happen there.
Why can't we keep the park?
Yeah, why is it not viable?
Yes.
Why?
I thought I heard
I
that
think
from
a
somebody
park
here.
that size.
I mean, we already have 2 other large parks on the map. How many are we going to have in Sherwood West?
Do our other preferences
We
capture the
like
park?
parks.
Not at all. I'm just I'm a realist.
I like my parks.
I guess my idea is that
No, I just think we'll end up with we're going to have 1 or 2 large parks and a lot more smaller parks.
This was the preference, right?
well, that's the thing is, what is that park? Is that like where's the soccer fields, the baseball fields, the things like that? And putting that close to that hospitality is probably not.
Probably not that.
No, it's like if
It's
you
probably
want-
more this one that would have a combination. And when I'm pointing to this one, the one
No.
just south of Chicken Creek would have a combination of some sports and some natural. Yes, and it's a lot more likely the one we were just looking at where that would locate. So of the choices you've made so far, there's one community park that is in your polling tonight.
Those are 2. There's the center course.
Or just-
Yeah.
Sand trap.
North by Edie.
Oh, my bad. Okay, sorry.
And that's what
Those
the
are very
Parks
close
Board
together.
wants as well.
That was your vision, was 2 community parks, and a third one does cross the line.
Maybe a smaller park. I mean, I think a small community, might be more appropriate than a larger park. Yeah, like a wood, like something like Dump Truck Park.
So for the draft, how about if we come back with alternative 2, small park, smaller park than is shown than this one, and then we'll fill in some land use in that area to be determined.
I think too, because we're taking pieces of all all the maps were built by individual groups
Yeah.
as a whole, right? And now we're kind of piecemealing it together. So we're gonna have to play around with some of the transitions from zone to zone to zone.
It's easier to work that way than to look at all
Totally.
1,300 acres.
Oh, totally.
This is the Build-A-Bear approach.
The one on Chicken Creek, though, it expands into all that green space, with trails and stuff all the way through there. So it's not necessarily just the park, but it includes all of that. so it'll feel bigger.
Okay. So this is helpful.
Not a high school, like a 7-Eleven.
Let's see if we can kind of move towards the finish line. We've been here a long time. Good job by everybody.
Good idea.
So we have one more question after this. We wanted to check in on,
We shut it down.
we've already talked about the north-south, but on this one, should we continue to study this realignment?
Yes.
And-
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Why is that even a question? We
Um,
were all pretty unanimous on that. when
Right,
this all
but
started.
the community feedback has been more heavily towards leave Elwert where it is.
That's a point in time, I think you guys pointed out at the beginning of this, we had a whole different group of community members that wanted us looking at that, so.
Well, there were a lot of people though from the open house, a lot of comments on it from the open house too, that were not.
That's why we brought it back.
Yeah,
Not in
so
favor
it's
of
not, that's not from months ago, that's from last month. But
But I'd be curious, like, why?
I'll have them say.
Yeah, I'll go read through it.
Honestly, if we would have left it the way it was, no one from East Road would have showed up, and everybody from Eddie would have showed up, and we would have the exact opposite.
Well, if the reason is you don't want to realign because you're afraid of another road being built, like obviously that's a connected thing. Whereas if we say, okay, the other road's not going to be built, does realign make sense for other reasons? Then we need to look at it, in both ways.
You mentioned something about the environmental impact right around there. Is it any less feasible to improve Elwert to what we've looked at as the sunset plan? Is it less feasible to do that than to do this wide change around? I mean, they're all difficult and expensive, or can you just not even do it?
Well, it's anytime you traverse, you try to change a road or widen a road or do something through a floodplain like that is, you run into all kinds of environmental requirements and barriers.
But you're gonna have to do that whether you stay where it is or if you move it over. You're gonna have to do
I
that
think
no
we
matter
had
what.
some preliminary cost estimates that the actual realignment might be cheaper. Yeah.
That's what they say. And the rationale is that the environmental impact may in fact be higher if you leave it where it is.
Yeah.
Plus,
you have to raise it
the
like
constructability is more challenging.
Right.
Because you have to provide a way for people to still get around while you're improving the road.
I think all of those are really good ways to let the community know that this isn't just because, we think we should move it around. It's for the environment, it's for the traffic, it's for all of those things. I think that message goes out. It's definitely worth it.
Our last question was going to be about the north-south connector. Should we continue to study that? But we got our direction. Well, the easel's gone. But describe a concept, and it's a big line, not site-specific. Okay.
Sure.
Yeah, okay. Okay, thank you. That's great. We will put it together and, Erica, next steps?
So next steps here, we're probably gonna reconvene early in the new year. January 2023. Or 20, what? 2023.
All right, thanks everybody for hanging in. We're done.